All right, we're back. It is COMP2007 Enterprise Computing Summer 2016 at Georgian, and we are week 13, part 1. It doesn't say part 1, but I'll change it after part 1 of our broadcast. Couple of announcements for next week. Remember that the exam next week is optional, right? So everyone has more than enough marks after they finish their project that they don't need to go. Some people may choose to go and come over to the exam because maybe they didn't do so good on a lab or test or something, and you know, you want to kind of make up for some of that, or maybe you didn't do so good on an assignment, or you didn't hand something in, you know. So there's an opportunity for you to kind of come in for that, but you don't have to come. It's optional. And so what I mean is, let's say, for example, I don't know, you totally fail the exam, right? There's no averaging. It's not like I'm going to take the exam and go, gee, you were doing 90, now you did, like, you know, 1 out of 100, and so now you're like, you crap, you fail, right? It's not like that. It's only worth 10%. So that means that if you get like 1 out of 10, you get 1 added as a bonus mark, right? It's not like a bad thing. It's not going to hurt you to do the exam anyway, but you may choose not to. It's still going to be 90 or 120 minutes of you building something. That's what's going to happen on the exam. And with MVC, you're probably going to use some kind of local DB. There won't be any Azure access because of all of our lovely challenges with Azure lately, right? And you're probably going to have to download something from Blackboard or something that'll give you so you can put your assignment together, right? So bear with me. If you're going to come by, you can. You know, I'm going to start promptly at on the hour. If you want to take your exam in different sections, different time frames, you can do that. No, it's not a problem for me. At the end of the day, it's just about you know, you guys finishing up and everything else, and having a good experience. So that's really it for that perspective. Remember that tomorrow you've got your officially your part 2 is due, right? But unofficially, if you hand it in Saturday, I can close one eye, right? So don't worry about that. Don't go too crazy. Please don't kill yourself with all the workload. I know there's a lot of stuff happening all at the same time right now. So I want to help you out. It's okay if you hand it in on Saturday, you know, just so that way you guys can have a good, you know, good product. I'd rather see you do well than rush, you know, to get it done. But remember that next week is the final week, so you have to get everything in by next week. I want to be able to accept it past that, not because I don't want to, but just it's over, right? It's done. So let's see if we can get everything in properly by next week. Okay, let's talk about some other stuff, like what we have to do now. So we're going to be talking about ASP.NET Web API. We're going to build something like this. I kind of got this working today. You got a little bit of a, hello. You get a little bit of a list. Is this working? Am I running it? It is. Okay. So on the front end, you're going to see this, you know, genre list. Looks like it's pretty simple, but it's a bit of a gruel, you know, to get it done. You know, so you click on classical, and then it uses Angular to kind of produce these views. And we can mix and match stuff to, you know, to produce details. So we're going to use the same MVC music store, the data from that, because it's complex enough that we have to talk about some issues and how to deal with the issues. Part of the issues we have with the MVC stuff that we're going to be doing with Web API is it's a complex database, if you think about it, with lots of linkages. We're going to talk about that and how difficult that makes it for us, right? So that's going to be one of the things we have to discuss. The other thing is that, well, Web API can be kind of a pig and a half. So just saying, right? It sometimes can be difficult, and things have updated. You know, so that could be a bit of a challenge. Let's start off. I want you to start a new project, right? So I'm going to go File, New, Project for this one. It's going to be an ASP.NET Web application, and COMP2007, Summer 2016, Lesson 13, C. There we go. Always the C class is, you know, the one we train on, right? I've been training all day to make this class like perfect. Of course, things don't always work that way. You're going to choose Web API. Yes, you could have chosen single page application to make it easy, but we don't want to make it easy. We want to learn new stuff. So let's choose Web API. Notice that both these checkboxes are checked, right? We don't want to host in the cloud. We don't want to change authentication. Just press OK. One thing you're going to notice when you launch this is that you're going to have some familiarity with the project structure, because if you've done MVC, then Web API is looking pretty much the same. Like you look at it and go, yeah, that kind of looks like the same as everything else I've seen. Let's take a look. So you see that we have the same kind of structure. One thing that you'll notice has changed is app start. You also have something called a Web API config file. That's new. We have to, and this is the pattern for the Web API URL. So you have your API. So actually, you have to type API. Certainly, you can change this to whatever you want. The controller name goes next, and then an optional ID parameter. Okay, so that's the path type for or route for Web API. So what is Web API? Think about it as a service, a web service, and it takes, at the best form, it takes, like, let's say, server data from, let's say, SQL Server, serializes it, spins it, and makes it into JSON data, or XML, if you really want. And what it can do is you take that data, consume it with a service, like AngularJS. You can use a service or a factory to consume that data, just like we've learned before. And then you can use your AngularJS front end, and then the back end would be MVC. Now we can also use it so that on the back end, we can kind of do all our routing and everything else. You're going to see that today with Web API on the back end. Okay, so we would leave the routing away from Angular. Could we include Angular routing? We could, but it would make it even more complicated than it's going to be. Okay, so that's really what this thing does in a nutshell. Let's talk about the stuff we need to do to get things going. One thing is, I'd like to try and get everything set up, all of our dependencies. So let's just right-click here on the project, and I'm going to go to Manage NuGet Packages. We're going to start installing a bunch of packages here. So I want to go to Browse, and I want to download Font Awesome, of course, because you might want to use this. One of the questions I might get at the end of this is, so why are we doing this? Well, because it's an option for you. If you were to choose to use Angular, I mean, you probably would earn a bit of a bonus on your final project there. It is difficult. It's definitely out of your way in terms of the stuff that you need to do. So that would be one. AngularJS is what we want to look. So if I look for Angular here, notice that there are a bunch of options. Angular Core, Angular Route, right? AngularJS Animate, and AngularJS, all right? We want to choose, and I've tried this a couple times, I'm going to be a little bit adventurous at the end of the day today. Let's choose Angular Core. Let's add that in. Now this is version 1.5.8, so I want to try this out. So I want to try and be as lean as we can here. I've tried it fat, lean today. I've tried all kinds of ways, and it's beat me up quite a bit today, Web API, but we'll see what happens. Okay, I definitely want route. We won't need routing, but let's put that into place as well as resource. Definitely AngularJS resource we want. You could also include other files, but that should be sufficient for what we need to do. Hey, along with Angular, we need to update some of these files. So let's go into this place here where it says updates, and just cancel that. Select them all, and make sure you deselect jQuery right now, because again, it's still incompatible with Bootstrap 3.3.7, the latest version of jQuery 3.1. All right, so lots of updates. We're just going to update this one. Now I'm preparing this project because, like this, to make sure that it's all good. We're also going to be using TypeScript today, but only because it makes it easier from a code hinting perspective, not because I want to make new classes and objects with TypeScript. That's not the point of it, for today anyway. So we want to use TypeScript. So I want to search for TypeScript here as well. So if I go TypeScript, there's two type definition libraries that I want, jQuery, and we can download one that's compatible with what we have. So let's just use 2.2.4 just to be on the same level. Now this is the TypeScript version, not the jQuery version, but just to be safe, let's use that one. And press yes when it says, do you want to enable or configure support for TypeScript? We do want that. Okay, next, we also want to add AngularJS definitions. We want that for sure. So let's do that. All right, so we've got those pieces. Let's restart. Just to be clear, when you restart, sometimes what will end up happening is you'll get another version of another like project. So please, when you do this kind of stuff, make sure that it's the right file that you're opening up. Like I can tell you right now, 8 times out of 10, it's opening some other project, right? It's really weird when it does this. Like here's this one, look, it's opening a totally different project, right? This isn't the project we were working on. So please close the solution that you were working on before and open up the new one. So we're working on 13C. Okay, so we're back to normal. We've got this piece. I want to make a connection to the database now. And remember, I want to use the database that's existing right now, which is the database we've been using for our music store MVC kind of thing, which is, for me, it's on COMP2007 up online. Please use the database that works best for you, right? So that you don't have to kill yourself to make this work. Notice that when I look at the database and the tables up online, not a lot of tables, right? Not a lot of tables. But there's enough that would make some challenge in terms of us updating everything. We'll see that in a second. So what do? You right-click on your models as normal, and you click Add, and you go New Item. And then from New Item, you're going to hit Data. You're going to go to ADO.NET, Enter Data Model, and you're going to select MVC Music Store Context. Okay, and then click Add. It's going to ask you, what do you want to use? We're going to use code first from database. If we had a quiz today, it would have been that. That's the answer. That's the best choice these days for what we're doing. Click Next. New connection is what we want here, right? We want to choose the connection that is on our Azure server. You can also choose local DB if you have no room on Azure. For this example, I'm just going to choose Azure, so you can see the real lag that I'm going to get from Azure. It's not Azure's fault, it's my fault, right? All right, so I want to go COMP2007 v2.database.windows.net. I'm going to change our authentication type to SQL Server Authentication, and if I can type my name today. All right. COMP2007 is also the database for me. And we're going to click OK. All right, what we do want to do, I'll wait for a second while this updates. What I want to do is for sure click yes. And down in here, what I want to do is Music Store, MVC Music Store Connection. Okay, we want a connection because we want that to be different than the context. Click Next. And I want to click on the tables. I want to click all the tables and then just remove migration history because I don't care about that. Okay, click Finish. So what is this going to do? It's going to go out to the database, grab the tables that I want, and create the models that I had before. And as well as the context, which is important. So this is all similar stuff to what we've done before. Nothing different here. However, I have to warn you that the default stuff that we get from from Web API is XML. In order for us to get JSON, which is the stuff that we want to use for Angular, you need to change our app.start folder. So inside our app.start, go to Web API config, double click, and if you notice, there's some areas here that we that describe the application from a Web API perspective. We need to go in here and change some options. Let me pull up my notes so we can do this nice. Yeah, we get some extra work there. All right, so what we want to do is, bear with me while I pull out my notes. What we want to do is we want to serialize, when we use Web API, we serialize our SQL data and turn it into JSON or XML. This can be quite hard on the server if you think about what it's doing, right? Especially when you have a complex group of tables that we have. Here's the challenge, okay? You have these tables, and the tables that we have are all linked together. They've got foreign keys. What we have sometimes, what happens is we have these cyclical references that happen. Example for our 3 tables that I want to work on today. And I'll look at the models to give you a reminder of what they look like. I have album and genres, right? Genres have many albums. So there's a one-to-many relationship, right? And also albums, artists have many albums, right? Albums also have a relation to models. And albums also have a relation to artists. So we're going like this. We're kind of making these big loops. This can be a problem. How would the computer know, or the processor, compiler, whatever, how to convert from all these cyclic references to a JSON object? It's very challenging. So it would fail. If you tried to just turn on JSON, and I'll show you how to do that right now, it wouldn't be enough. So here's what you do to turn it on. So we're inside our web API config.cs, inside of our app start folder. And we need to do var JSON. We're going to say our config.formatters, right, is the JSON formatter. So that basically says, hey, turn on JSON. I also want to, just to make sure about these references, we don't want to lose our references from one table to the other. So we want to say preserve references handling, and let's just put this on the next line. It's equal to, we'll say Newtonsoft, I can spell, and that Newtonsoft, there we go, .json, preserve reference handling, .objects. Okay, there we go. What this does says, hey, don't get rid of our links. That's what it means. Don't forget our foreign keys. Okay, next. We also want to, at some point, look at the formatters, and we want to remove the formatter that's by default, that's there, that's been configured, which is our XML formatter. So we want to get rid of that, because we want like XML and JSON to be both populated in there. That's number 2. And here's the third one, fourth one. JSON. We want to also hit our serializer settings again, and we want to say our reference loop handling. So that's when we do these cyclical references, right? What we want to do is we want to say that Newtonsoft again, .json, reference loop handling, right? We want to set it either to ignore or to serialize. I'm going to set mine to serialize. You need these options, folks. If you don't do this, you'll never run Web API properly. It just won't happen. All right, so once we've got these things set up, we're almost ready to go. But remember what we'll see. The problem is right now all we have is our models folder, and we need some controllers. This is all again on the Web API side, so on the ASP.NET stuff. We have models, we need some controllers. In order for us to ensure that that works perfectly and good, we need to build our solutions. Let's build my solution here. And wait till it stops. And so it's finished building. It's important. Good. Now, let's add some controllers, and we'll talk about them. So here's our first controller. We're going to right-click on our controllers. We're going to go Add, New Controller, and we're going to choose, this time, Web API 2 controller with actions using Entity Framework. Okay, so this one. We were always using this one before, but now we're using the new one. Okay, Add. We're going to, our model class here is, I want to start off with, not with album. Album is the most complicated one. Let's start off with artist, right? And we'll use async controller actions, right? We'll also choose the MVC Music Store context and call it the artist controller. Click Add. It'll scaffold it out. Notice what it will not do is create views, right? Because this isn't the same thing that we've been doing so far. I'll go over this in a second. Let's do a couple more, the 2 that we need. Add another one. Add another controller. Second one is going to be, we'll make it so that it is genre. That's the second one. There's our genre controller, right? Same kind of music, MVC Music Store context. We're still using async. Click Add. Excellente. All right, and let's do the last one, which is our album. Album is more complex because we have lots of cyclic references there. All right, so again, we want to add controller, and again, Web API 2 controller, and then choose album, and press add. Okay, so after this, we have all of our controllers we're going to use today, right? Those 3 controllers. Now you might say, Tom, we've done controllers before. This is nothing new. You know, it's just looks like MVC to me. Yes and no. Let's take a look at the controllers so I can prove to you that it's not the same. Here's genre. The genre controller looks a little different. One thing is you have a context for your database connection right here. And then what we have is an iQueryable that allows us to list the genre as an example. And if you notice the path, it's API genre. So if I wanted to see the genre, I could just go there. Let's run this thing to see how it looks. I'm going to run the project now the way it is, and you're going to see the first thing we need to do is check to see, are we getting JSON data from our SQL Server data, right? Are we serializing properly? If we're not serializing properly, nothing's going to help us when it comes to moving towards Angular. So again, the way you do API is API first, and then let's say we do artists. There we go, and press enter. Now you're going to get, when this works, a bunch of looking like spaghetti. It's like lots of JSON data. So you'll never go here, but your service will. The service you're going to build is going to go to the site, make a GET request, and then it's going to get JSON data, and we'll see how long it's going to take. Take some time for the first round, and then there you go. Yeah, this is really descriptive. This is fantastic, this data that we're getting. So what does this all mean? And let's take a look. This is one thing we need to do. So we're going to select all, copy, and there's a site that you go to. If I go to JSON Editor Online, if you go to JSON Editor Online, and if I select all and paste, you can see we got a problem. And let me show you what I'm talking about. I've got a little bit of data at the beginning. Here's my artist, Aaron Copeland, right? I got a little bit of data in number 2, right? Aaron Goldberg. And then I'm screwed. I got nothing. What did I do wrong? It's the cyclic, kind of like errors that we're going to get, right? We're going to get these references. So we need to fix this, because it doesn't matter what we do on the front end to make this work properly. If you're not getting the data from the back end, it's never going to work properly for you, right? So let's fix the back end. How? Well, we don't fix it from the controllers. We actually fix it. I'm just going to remove these for a second. I'm going to stop this. We fix it from the models. Okay, there's a few things we can do here. So let's see what we get with the models. If I look at my genre model, right, I have a couple things. I have, that's the controller. If I look at my genre model, there we go. You can see that I have my genre ID and my name and description, and I've got this collection of albums, right? All these things are pretty cool, except for probably description. Notice that if you actually look at the data, if I go to SQL Server, Object Explorer, and if I right-click onto genre, and if I view the data from there, you'll see that there's no descriptions right now. So do we really need them right now? Probably not. Will we need them in the future? Don't know. We can probably get rid of it. So how do you do that? You can set up a new attribute that's JSON ignore. What JSON ignore, you need to actually add a new library to do that, which is using Newtonsoft JSON. What JSON ignore tells the compiler is, hey, don't collate or reference data having to do with the description field. I don't care about that field. Okay? And we can do that for several other places. Like, for example, artists. Let's go to artists for a second. One of the problems we're having with artists is it has a cyclical reference with albums, right? So please, let's do the same thing here with albums. And this was the fix from this morning. So we'll say JSON ignore. You have to put that there too. Okay, and again, we're going to have to generate, no. See what happens. I put JSON, like JSON in the Argonauts, right? Not JSON, as in JavaScript object notation. All right, let's put that in. All right, good. So that kind of takes care of that. Notice how we have an artist ID and name. We need one more to fiddle with, and that's going to be, it's going to go back to album. That's the last one. There are some things I recommend you do. Album ID has to stay at the top. Genre ID and artist ID. Notice there's artist. I'm just going to cut this one out. I'm going to put this with artist ID. I like to pair them up, right? They go good together, you know. And genre. Here's genre. Cut this one out. And I'm going to go over here to genre ID. There we go. And then we have title, price, and album URL. We're going to grab these three and cut those out too. Put them underneath the album ID, right? Because that's the key, primary key there. We have a little bit of space. We're going to take those spaces away. I know this is just kind of formatting, you might think, but actually, we want to definitely say for these ones, for carts and for order details, we definitely want to say ignore, or JSON, sorry, JSON ignore. And we'll do the same thing for this piece. Again, this is just so that way we don't have additional information we don't need, and then we can read the information we want. So imagine you have a very complex database. You have, let's say you're doing a restaurant, you have food items, so you have different categories of food. They're all related. You may have a bit of a cluster when it comes to showing your data with JSON. All right, this is cool. Let's see if we can test this now and see if we can get proper data. So I'm going to run this thing again. And what I want to test for sure is our genre data and see how it comes out, right? So how do I test that? I want to do, again, I want to go API, genre, plural, and then press enter. If we have a good hit, we'll be able to see all the genre-related data. There it is. I want to select all, copy, go back to my JSON editor online, select all, paste, and then click this right arrow. And what this is going to do, and this is why I like using this tool, is it kind of makes each of these things an object, right? So if I look at this one, take a look. I've got my classical, right? I've got my jazz. I've got my rock with 111 albums. This is good. This is what you want. So now it's fixed. Guys and girls, if you don't have this, and if you don't see proper objects, you see some kind of references, something's wrong, right? So you need to fix the references. Otherwise, you're never going to have good data. It's always going to error out for you, and you're going to be very frustrated with the Angular piece. Okay. Now that we got this piece working, this is just the data piece, right? We need to get the other stuff working. All right. What do I mean by the other stuff? Okay. Let's talk about our views. We have a couple of things here already. We have the backend data. This is how we're going to consume it. And if I want to, actually, let me just run this thing one more time so you can see. If I want to filter by something, I could do certainly something like this. I can go /API /artists and then 1. And so the first artist in the list, you're going to get this. Aaron Copland and London Symphony Orchestra. You can see that it's a very simple relation now, right, for artists, right? And this is the kind of stuff that we want to get. We want to get kind of like one thing. So what happens on the back end, we'll never see this data. API artists, you know, as an example, we'll never see that. That's going to be handled by our service. Our service is going to go out there, grab that data, read it in as a piece of AJAX data, manipulate it as an example. And if you want to, you can delete it, update it, edit it, whatever you want to do, or create new data. If you look at our our controllers, the API controllers that we got, Web API, I look at them, and if I look at, let's say, for example, genre, right? Like I showed you, you can certainly do a list. You can do a feed, and for specific details, like for a specific item, right? We can, a put is used for updating. That's what we use for updating. We also have a post for creating, and we have a delete for deleting. And then we have something called dispose, which closes the connection, okay? Because we're using different kinds of data, different connections for Web API, right? So all those things exist for every single controller, Web API controller out there right now, because we need them. Because each one of those controllers has the ability for us to do full CRUD on them, even now, the way they are. For example, if you use Postman, you could use the path and then create basically some data, or do a post or whatever you want to do. Okay, so that's this thing. Now I want to set up my Angular project. Okay, and this is all set up right now. So first we got our data working. Now we need to get Angular working. Okay. In order for us to get Angular working, I'm going to go back to the app start folder, and I'm going to start looking at my bundle config. Okay. Bundle config is a very convenient way of bundling our scripts and styles. One thing I want to do is definitely add in our bundle config, I want to add in a reference to font awesome. So again, it's font-awesome .css. I want to put that in there. Okay, and you know what? I want to create two more bundles. One for Angular, right? Just for Angular, and the other one for our application bundle, right? Let's put that together. So I'll say bundles.add. We'll say new script bundle. And we'll do this bundles, call it Angular. That's our virtual path. And then include, right? I'm going to take it to here. All right, and inside this area here, between these parentheses, right, what we want to put in is the reference to, or the path, the absolute path to where we're looking. So I definitely want in our scripts, notice that unfortunately for us, and this is kind of, I don't like it about the way it's been set up. Yeah, we can probably move it around, but notice that our scripts are like all in here, in one folder. Not like it. I don't like this at all. I like all these scripts to be like in a lib folder or something else. Unfortunately, they're way out here, right? So what I want is scripts Angular.js, right? I also want scripts Angular-route.js, and I want scripts Angular-resource. Very important. If you don't have this one, our project won't work. .js. Okay, so that's all of our Angular scripts. Let's do another one for us. Okay, in order for that to happen, we need to figure out this. I want an app.js file, right? I'm going to create a couple of controllers, one for each screen that I'm going to make, right, with you guys, one for each view, and then a couple of services, one for each view. Again, so the service that we're going to create and the controller for each view is kind of tightly coupled, so that they actually work together. You could probably put them in one file, but I highly recommend from a kind of splitting things up to make it a little bit easier for us to look at. So let's take a look at this. How do I do that? Again, it's the same thing. I want to add some more bundles, but I need some files already in place. So I'm going to right-click on scripts. I want to add a couple of folders. So one, I want to make a new folder called modules. Our modules folder is where I'm going to put our app module. All right, there it is, app module. We're also going to make a couple more folders. One of them is going to be the controllers folder. Now, this not to be confused with the MVC controllers or Web API controllers. This is Angular controllers. And the next one would be also, from a new folder perspective, I want to choose services. All right, so we've got controllers, modules, and services. Just folders. Let's create our files inside of them. So in our modules, we want to create our new TypeScript file, which now you can choose JS as well. I'm using TypeScript for code hinting only. I'm going to call this thing app.ts, which it will become app.js. Okay, same thing with our controllers. I want to add in 2 controllers and 2 services. So the first controller, again, I'm going to go add TypeScript file, right? Is going to be our genre controller. So I'm going to put genre. And the next controller is going to be our, again, add a new TypeScript file. Albums by genre. Now this is kind of neat because what I'm doing is I'm kind of making it so that I'm kind of cross-referencing or creating a filter type controller that can give me specific data. Albums by genre controller. I want to do the same things, these 2 files. I want to kind of mirror them in the services side. So I want to right-click on services when it allows me to do so, and then create albums by genre. Make sure that they're spelled properly, please. This is the biggest problem with this stuff. I made it long on purpose, I think. TypeScript file. So again, it's genre, and the other one is albums by genre. So add, again, TypeScript file, albums by genre. There we go. Okay, so we got all of our files, and we know where they are. Now I can add them into the bundle. Nothing's been generated yet, but we're going to go back into them in a bit. All right, let's create our bundle and the virtual path. So the first thing is bundles.add, and then new script bundle. Okay, bundles, and we're going to call this application. This is our application bundle for the application, right? Okay, down in here, what we want to put in is all of our scripts that we just kind of added in. So I want to put in the first one. I always like to put the app module first. I'm going to say scripts, modules, right? App.js, because remember that TS doesn't get recognized on most browsers right now, and only the JS. So we have to transpile. We do that automatically upon save with Visual Studio. And we're going to go to next one is going to be controllers. We'll do controllers next. And we'll do the genre.js controller, as well as scripts controllers. And then it's the albums by genre. Make sure you spell it right. .js. There we go. Albums by genre. And the last one, again, is last section is scripts, and then services, genre.js, and we'll fix that error. And then scripts, services, albums by genre.js. Now, it might be confusing. You're like, well, the same name, Tom, but yeah, they're different folders, so it's okay. So it's like genre controllers. I could have made it so it says genre.controllers, but that would be really long. And we tried that this morning, and it was very hard to type everything. Okay, so we've got our bundle config, but it's not going to do us any good unless we add it into our layout.cshtml. So let's do that next. So we're going to go into inside our views, there's a place that's called shared, and we're going to go to layout CSHTML. And on the bottom here, we're going to add 2 more bundles. We're going to say our scripts render. We're going to look at the bundles, and it's going to be Angular, right? That's the first one. We kind of named that one. And we're also going to do a scripts render, and then this one will be our bundles application. What I really like about Microsoft's bundling, like I mentioned this last week, I think it's quite a good system, clean. I would love to make one of my own for the web, like just because we don't have one that's really, really that good. Okay, so we've got our bundles, everything's linked together. Hey, let's test out Angular. Well, we can't, right? We're missing one vital piece to it. We need to create an app module, right? That's the first piece. So let's go to our app modules, or app.ts, right? And I want to do a couple things. I want to say let app. We're going to look at this as an ng.imodule. Notice I'm getting a some code hinting already, which is really good. This is telling us that the type is an interface, a module interface, right? And what I want to do here is I want to create a closure. So we're going to do this in JavaScript. This is an iffy, immediately invoked function expression, right? So we want to kind of do this piece here. It's our iffy, and this is where this thing is going to live, right? So we're going to use AppModule in here. I'm just going to get a bit of a code drop here just to make sure that we're more accurate. So I'm going to go to our scripts. I'm going to go to app.ts and open this up. Open with my Notepad. I'm just going to kind of grab this stuff in here and I'll talk about it just to make it a little quicker for us. So copy and paste. So what is this stuff? So I'm going to make this this module called main application module name. We're going to use MVC Music Store. And then app, which is outside of our closure. So it's kind of exposed in the cold. It's outside of the walls of our protection, right? Angular.module, we're going to declare it as the name MVC Music Store. And then we're going to request as a dependency, the square brackets mean, hey, what's the dependencies for this thing? The ng resource, which is our the ability for us to use services and factories. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say this. We're going to use Angular element, and we're going to point to the document element, which is the main element on the, or the root element of most pages. And we're going to say when it's ready, what we want to do is, here's a little fat arrow expression. We want to say, use an anonymous function to return this, or to make this bootstrapping work, manual bootstrapping work for Angular, and attach itself to the document that we mentioned, right? And by the way, make sure that you use the word MVC Music Store to denote that this is part of the MVC Music Store module. This is equivalent to us going into manually going up or automatically doing ng-app and then, equals to MVC Music Store. Instead of us going manually doing that on the page, this is going to be doing manual bootstrapping for us, where it's going to attach ng-app, to the page. Once we have this in place, we can test to see if Angular is working. All right, that's the first piece we need to use, this piece in place, right? You guys got that? So how do we test it? Well, we're going to be using, throughout the session today, we're going to be using our home controller's index.cshtml to test it. So let's go into index.cshtml and other files. Let's kill everything in here. So we don't want the Jumbotron or anything. Let's just get rid of it. And the best way, of course, to test Angular is to use those double mustaches, right? So we're going to say div, we'll put a div together, and inside the div tag, we'll say double mustache. I don't know. This time we'll do a little different. We'll say hello world. Hello world. Right? And you know what? We'll do a double mustache underneath that too, just to be a little bit funny. And we'll say 1 + 1. These are called expressions in Angular. And what we can do is if we get results for this, we actually get hello world without the curlies, right? And 1 + 1, we get 2, right? Then we know Angular's firing, and we're good to go. Let's check this out and see if it works. So I'm going to run everything in Chrome. Everything goes well, then we should have a good connection, and we should get this hello world, and 1 + 1 is equal to 2, right? We should see 2 that comes up. Let's take a look. Oh man, what the hell? What happened? How come it didn't connect? Something went wrong. Well, this is where we do some troubleshooting. Doesn't matter how many times you refresh, by the way. If this doesn't go away, that means Angular's not firing properly. So we're going to go to inspect, and if you go to console, you can see that a token, comma, is an unexpected token at a column 6 of the expression hello world, starting at world. Right, so didn't like that. Didn't like when I did hello world, right? Let's go back here and take it out. What's the other way I could have done this? Could I have done this? Could I have done hello world? Is that better for Angular? And as you'll see, if I go here and refresh, right? And see if this happens. It doesn't really go away until I put those quotations up. And now it becomes 2 and Angular works. So it was trying to figure out what I was trying to do. Because remember, it was trying to say is, hey, are these 2 variables that I'm trying to inject into the file, hello and then world, 2 variables, or what is it? So because I've put it in quotation marks, it detects it as a text, and we're good to go. So Angular is up and running. And again, it hasn't taken us that long to put things together, but this is the first piece, get Angular running, right? Let's go back. What I want to do is I want to restructure some of this because I want to be able to show different parts of the application. I want to be able to, when I'm on this main page here, I want to list the thank you for that. I want to list the genres on this page. That's what I want to do, right? So the first thing I'm going to do here, thank you, is I'm going to change this again, and I'm just going to stop debugging for a second. What I want to do is let's put a div tag, and inside the div tag, I want to make it a class. We'll just use a little bit of some CSS here. So a class of column, medium, offset 3 for 3 columns to the left, and then column dash medium 6. So 6 columns for the whole space. That might be a little bit too big, but that's okay. That's our div tag. Inside the div tag, I want to have an h1 tag. And then next to the h1 tag, I want to have a UL, and I'm going to put it in brackets here. And I'm going to list with a class of list group. Okay, and then inside the unroot list, I want a list item with a class of list dash group dash item. You can see how this is going, right? And then next to, we're going to say next to the list item, or inside the list item, how about that? Inside the list item, we want an anchor tag as an example. And then next to the anchor tag, we want I don't know if it'll work if we do all this, a span tag, right? If I press tab, you'll get all this. I'll undo that so you can see that. So it looks like this. So I'm using Emmet or Zen coding in Visual Studio. It comes bundled with VS Web Essentials, and I've been using it throughout. But it's a really quick way of kind of creating some code if you just kind of a shortcut to make things go. So I'm going to press tab again, and I've got my format the way I want it. Let's make some modifications here, right? I know that the div tag is where I want my controller to live. So I'm going to say ng-controller. Remember, we say this is a directive. We're going to say wherever I put my ng-controller, it's pointing at anywhere between the div tags here, the opening and closing tag, my controller will live and die. So the scope of my controller is in these div tags between line 1 and line 9. After that, it's dead, right? We're going to call this the genre controller. By the way, this is not the only way we can do this. Okay, with Angular and with web. Inside here, I want to put my view bag title, but I want to put a @ at viewbag.title. So we can do that we can mix and match Razor, and you're going to see us do that throughout the time together today. In our list item, we want to put in another directive, ng-repeat, which allows us to repeat or cycle through almost like a for each loop. And I'm going to say something like this: for each genre in genres, and where we're getting this I'll talk about in a second, for each one of those, what I want to do is I want to say this: go to the following link. Here's our link, home/browse, and then / and here's our funky syntax again, our double mustaches, right? Genre.genre ID, like this. And then for our link text, we want to do something like, genre.name. right? So that's our link text. Hey, for our span tag, I want to do a class of badge, right? And for our span, inside the span tag, we want to put a couple things. I want to say genre albums length. This is going to give us a length. I have to thank John Horn from class 2 for that one, right? Okay, so that's really our little view in a nutshell. It's a very tight little view. However, it has zero functionality right now. Why? Because we need two things tightly coupled: a controller and a service. The service is going to read or consume the JSON data, and the controller is going to be used to share the data and expose objects that belong to those to the database here within our CS/HTML file. So we have some apparent functionality. Okay, so those are the two things we need. So I'm going to save this piece. And I want to go into my home controller for a second because we need to fool with that for a second, our home controller. Because I got my view bag title, but I haven't really defined what that is. Let's go into Solution Explorer, or at least it's not any good. Let's go into Solution Explorer. I'm going to go to my, again, this is MVC, Web API controllers. I'm going to go to my home controller. Notice I only have one. My view bag title is homepage. That won't do. It should say genre list, right? That's what it should say. And if you remember what this does, in our, just to give you an example, when we do a get here, what we're really saying is, hey, go to the home controller, look at the index, or just do a slash, and you should be able to get this genre list. That's what I want to do, right? Another thing I really want to do is I want to reference our modules. So I'm going to say something like using COMP2007 lesson 13 models, and then inside of our class, I want to reference the music store context. So I'm going to say music store context db is equal to new music store context, which creates a connection to the to use that, but I will need it later on, and that's why I added it in now. All right, so we've got this piece. We've got our genre list, and that's what it's going to say when it comes up. Nice. Let's start building out our controllers. And I want to start with one controller at a time. Again, it's, at first it seems a little daunting when you start off. You're looking at this stuff and you're trying to figure out what's going on. But it's actually not as hard as it seems if you just try and absorb what's being done. So we'll start off with our genre controller first. Ready? Here we go. So remember we exposed, first of all, let's see which one this is. There's two, right? There's this one. If I hover over it, it says services genre. And this one, which is controller genre. This is the one I want. Remember I exposed app, right? So I can do app, right, dot controller. And I want to specify the name of the controller, which in this case is the genre controller. There we go. I also want to declare in block scope, right, that I want to use the scope variable that belongs to Angular scope variable. Plus, I also want to use something called a genre service. I don't have that yet, but I will. That's why I told you it's tightly coupled. And then the constructor function is going to look like this: scope, and then genre service. Right. So close that bracket, right? As an example, open this bracket up, go to the next level, close that bracket, close the square bracket, close the round bracket, and we're good to go. Now you might look and laugh, but truly, this is the way that I would start creating our controller. We've done two things now that I want you to remember. One is the most errors we get are when we don't add Angular and our own code to our index.html, right? If we don't add those in, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to pound your head trying to figure out where the errors are. Every Angular, not only just the libraries, but even your own files have to be added into the index.cshtml or any other CSHTML, in this particular case, file that we're using, because you will not get a good reference. You're going to say, don't know what this is. I don't have my library there. And we forget to do that sometimes. And the second thing is to declare the controller properly is very, very important. What are we doing here? We want to call this function. If you notice what we did in our index.cshtml, we said, hey, we want to get our genre in genres. But this genres keyword is coming from the scope variable. And I don't have a definition for this right now, this scope, this genres keyword, right? So where do we get that from? We're going to get it from our genre controller right here. So let's do this. We'll say, declare a new function, right, called getGenre. And this function returns void thanks to TypeScript. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to say, let our call to the genre service, this is just an object, right, is equal to the genre service, right, the one we're going to link to eventually. And we're going to use the get genres method of the genre service. Not ours, it doesn't relate to this one, not the controller part, but the actual genre service piece. We're going to make another one. Then what I want to do is I want to say call the genre service and then wait for success. Basically, we're waiting for success. When I say then, after everything is good, then we want to, and we're going to use a fat arrow statement here. We're going to look for an anonymous function that takes one parameter and returns. We're not going to use actually genre. Let's use response. That's what we'll get, response. We'll get a response object, and what it does is it actually returns something, right? What is it going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to set, here's where that funny genres comes in, our scope variable, which represents the scope of our controller, right? Think about it as this keyword for our controller, all right? Dot, and then genre, which is our dynamically typed variable or declared, and we're going to make it equal to response.data. So we're listening for the response data that we're going to get back from the service, right? And we're going to assign the data into the genre variable. All right. So that's one of the things we're going to do. Next, we're also going to check for errors. Just in case there's an error, we're going to do an anonymous function. Again, anonymous functions, we're going to use the fat arrow function for this one. And we're going to say that we're calling an anonymous function, and if we get an error, we're going to say console.error. Let's show a red line in the console that says, hey, something went wrong. Something went wrong, right? While fetching data. Some kind of crazy error. You don't want to see this error because that would be very bad, right? Take the semicolon away. Actually, we can leave it in. And then what we want to do is we want to close off this one like this. All right, that's our controller, but we're missing one piece. Nothing but nothing will take us to make us work our getGenre method or function. We have to be able to call the getGenre function somehow. There's two ways to do that. We could immediately invoke by putting two, opening and closing brace here. We could do that, or we could just call it within our scope, right? So we can do something like getGenre. That's okay too. So we're just going to call the function that's right here. So it's calling itself. And then what it's doing is it's reading the data from the service. And then what it's doing is it's going to take that data and assign it to the genre variable, the dynamic variable. And we're going to see that variable being used inside of our index.cshtml in here. OK, let's do the service, and then we're done for this one, for this couple. All right, so again, the type coupling, the genre service. We'll look at the genre itself. Here it is. That's the genre controller. Now we need to do the genre service. Genre service is very similar. We do an app.service. We're going to call this the genre service, and it's going to actually use an anonymous function which we're not going to convert to a fat arrow function. Sometimes that doesn't help us. And then what we're going to do here is inside of our app service, we're going to say this. We're going to declare a function called getGenre, right? It's going to be equal to an anonymous function. And again, there's different ways of writing this. I'll just write it this way this time. Anonymous function. The anonymous function itself is going to return our HTTP service, and we're going to use the get method of the HTTP service to go to that URL, API, and then genre. This is the same URL that we have in our path inside of our controller. Okay, so there it is. So there's the service. We've got our controller. Controller and service coupled together give us some functionality. Let's check this out. So there's two parts. Actually, there's three parts. One, the view. This is the view where we're going to put our service to use, right? And our controller. Okay, the view. Part two is the controller. The controller itself has our business logic for what's going to happen. This is going to take our information. It's going to connect with the service and return data, right? And then there's the model piece of our view, which is the service. The service is going to connect with our API, web API, consume the data, and return it back to the controller, right? So that's why they're loosely coupled, they're tightly coupled. You can actually put them together, like I said, a lot of people put them together in one file, controller and service, especially when they're like this. But we want to, from a separation of concerns perspective, we want to kind of separate them out because they could grow these little functions. All right, let's try this out. So I'm going to run this thing, and let's see what we get. Run it, and if we have a problem, this is the good time to troubleshoot. And then we'll take a short break after this. Let's take a look. All right, genre list is coming up, but I don't see anything. What's going on, right? Oh, there we go. That's pretty good. So we got a linked list of items, and you can see also that we have a bunch of these items here. These are just like little badges that tell us how many albums are for each genre, right? That was kind of, again, something that I wanted to add from a functionality perspective today. All right, this is a good start. We've got our first controller done. I'm going to upload this to GitHub at this point. So I'm going to go to stop debugging, right? Let's stop. I'm going to leave this little thing up here. We're going to check that later. I'm going to stop debugging, and I'm going to go to GitHub. We did a lot of work here, and I could have probably done a bunch of commits. But I'm going to go to changes. See, I've done 84 changes. I'm going to add, and I'm going to say set up a first Angular controller, service, and service for web API. There we go. Front stage. I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to go sync. And it's going to say, hey, Tom, do you want to create a GitHub repository? It's really weird. It's been giving me some really weird stuff going on lately. I'll be honest with you, I don't trust this lately. It's been really messing things up. I'm going to go to Georgian here, COMP2007, summer 2016, lesson 13C, and click publish. I'm going to check this right away to make sure it's the right one. It's been giving me some really weird effects. Like sometimes it'll publish it in another folder altogether. Let's check to see what it did. So I'm going to go here to the Mac side and go to GitHub and go to Georgian, and let's see what it does. There it is, COMP2007, summer 2016, lesson 13C, and you can see that I've got everything there. So if you want to follow along, please look at the code files up on GitHub. For now, let's take a short break. We'll do a bit of a bio break and come back in 10 or 15 minutes. We'll continue with the second half of this stuff.